I figured I'd call in about another fan favorite, Jimmy Dore. Now, I know you guys probably talked about Tulsi earlier, and if you didn't, or did, my bad, I'm a little late catching the show. But the other day, some old clips were popping up on my feed of Jimmy talking about Tulsi, et cetera, and then just kind of seeing, like, this whole little Jimmy Dore sphere and their world around them kind of, like, crystallize, and seeing how this is turning out has just been fascinating. And I will admit that I kind of got to know a lot of this independent, quote, independent creator space, maybe around like Force the Vote time. And I was more of like a researcher, but I ended up meeting a lot of the people like in that sphere. I never met Jimmy or anything like that. But just, it was interesting to kind of learn, like, completely clueless about like who these people are and how they operate, and really just seeing like what has come of it. I mean, I criticized JD back when, that whole thing with Anna happened. So I was like completely ostracized from that crowd since. I was even told, like, if you criticize him, it's kind of like biting the hand that feeds you. So I kind of realized like I needed to exit. But my long-winded story short is that I really appreciate the show and the analysis. And if anything, I'm just angry I was way late to kind of understanding this realm. So thank you.
I don't know if you've ever seen the exchange I had with Jimmy in 2016. I
did.
Keep threatening to recut that too, because one of the things that's unclear when you watch it is that I had invited Jimmy on. I had emailed him the night before, and I said, "Look, I'm going to take some issue with," and that was the show that he had, basically said that Peter Thiel, what difference does it make if he's on the Supreme Court?
Right.
And I'd emailed him, and he said, "No, I can't make it. Go to town." And apparently he was listening from his car to the show. And when he heard me start to talk about him, he called in. And maybe we could recut that so that we can sort of like examine that. But I'm interested in what you said about the hand that feeds you, because this is, like this, and I don't know, I don't want to get, I do a little bit of navel gazing on the show, but I one of the things that I am not good at doing, both dispositionally, but also, I probably adopted as a principle just to justify my antisocial behavior. But I don't do much of the like reciprocal guesting on shows thing.
Right.
I've never, ever been terribly comfortable doing it. And to the extent that I have always been like very careful to make sure that I'm not doing it, I probably have gone too far in the other direction in some respects. And it is the way that shows grow. You can see this on the right. You had a period of time when all these IDW people, it would just be a sort of like revolving circle jerk. Ben Shapiro would show up on Rubin's show. Rubin would show up on Shapiro's show. The Weinstein brothers would show up on Rubin's show. He would show up on their show. Sam Harris would go on their show, et cetera, et cetera. You'd see it on the, in the more like Daily Wire stuff, they'd all get together. And what would happen is, the reason why this builds an audience is because you as an audience member, you keep circling around. And not only that, you think that you're hearing different opinions, but they are all basically an extension of each other. And they're just basically, they're almost like confirming each other's bias and confirming it for an audience member. But I'm curious about the hand that feeds you, because there is also an awareness. And you see it a lot in this like sort of YouTube culture, that like, I'm not going to express something because I can't afford to burn this bridge on a social level, because it's really a business relationship. And so you see it amongst those people. All those Force the Vote people were just having each other on each other's shows as a way of sort of like creating that same dynamic. And, I don't know that I went on anybody's show ever to talk about Force the Vote. I guess it's conceivable I was on somebody's show who asked me a question about it. But I just go on random shows based upon, and in terms of the people we bring in, I rarely bring in commentators on the program. We do that on Friday. And it's just sort of like a specific it's probably antithetical to the business, any type of business, good business sense. But it just, that's what we do. But I'm curious about, like, when they said, don't bite the hand that feeds you, like, what context was that?
Well, the context, and again, I could call back, like, it's been a few months, just because my other job, I want to maintain that. And it's not like I understand. I was this high up person or anything. I really, like I said, was more of a researcher that kind of just fell into that space. But yeah, so it was another, really mid-sized creator. He's, definitely personable. A lot of these people are real personable. That's, of course, how they kind of, I don't want to say like get you in, but there's this kind of feeling of like, yeah, we're in this to kind of, quote, expose the truth or the other side, kind of touching on everything you were just saying. Whereas it's really just people going on other people's shows, boosting each other up, and
sometimes getting people to work for free. Oh yeah,
definitely. And then, of course, the projection, like they're grifters, they're liberal shills, and it was like, it got to a point where I was kind of like, what are we, like, this is clearly a little bit of an ecosystem here. So when I just happened to kind of start expressing with this particular group, like, hey, like what Jimmy was saying about, Anna, like, objectively, you can dislike her, like her, whatever. That's absolutely, that's not okay to say. And the pushback that I received was just like, minuscule compared to what you probably received, Emma. But I mean, I know it was, so I can't imagine going through all that. But, over time, you just kind of like, okay, it's almost like cult-like behavior. So the don't buy the hand that feeds you comment, the context of it was, my criticism, and then it was just like a casual, it's kind of like biting the hand that feeds you. And he months later realized, like, oh, shit, like she didn't actually forget that comment. And it's like, no, I still want to know, what does that mean? Who's feeding me? Jimmy Dore was never feeding me.
Yeah.
Never said.
Well,
ever.
Well, Jordan, I am curious too about, because the thing that tipped me off when I was getting started, and I was probably in not the same position as you, but I started as an intern making very little money, and then I was a contractor for a long period of time. So I was precarious and much at the whims of, like, I think, my boss at the time. And I kind of, with Jimmy specifically and with this whole crowd, I kind of ignored a lot of what I felt was like misogynistic and sexist talk because I just wanted to plow ahead. And I think that was like the thing that tipped me off more than anything, because it was also really intermixed with the Hillary Clinton coverage at the time. And I felt like my approach to covering Hillary Clinton and my feelings about her were a little bit different in tone and in feel than, say, what Jimmy and others were putting out there in this very specific space where, I feel like we're kind of talking about the same area.
Definitely. No, that definitely relate to a lot of that. And just like the observations, you're like, okay, we're not really, quote, that aligned here. And it just, to kind of close out, and like, maybe I will email you guys just some more interesting.
Yes, please.
I want to look into. Yeah, I definitely will. But just to close out, just following up with the Jimmy, the policy thing for another day. But Jimmy's recent video that he did on Biden lying about abortion, for whatever reason, again, it's like, I know this man's videos are going to annoy me, so I rarely watch them. But that one I had to. And to hear this guy just get on there talking about how, Biden and the Democrats are lying about abortion, it's not going to be a national ban. And it's like, you can't even do the due diligence on that of just mentioning the Lindsey Graham aspect. And so, again, this isn't news to anybody in the audience, nor, not even news to me, but it's just remarkable. And I wonder when this grift or this jig, whatever it is, will finally run its course. It's so obvious.
He's already basically said, like, you should vote for Republican to harm reduction because they're better at foreign policy. So, like, it's about running its course.
And
COVID. And we should be clear, well, first off, it will not. It will not run its course. The only discernible change will be what has happened to Tulsi, which is that, like, she is done trolling for people on the left. That part of her career is over. The same thing that has happened in many respects with Greenwald, same thing that happened with Dave Rubin. This is the trajectory. And I anticipate that that Jimmy will follow that same trajectory, frankly, because they are driven by a desire for celebrity. They're driven by a desire for money. I think there are probably other complicating factors in some of these people's lives, frankly, that not just in money in terms of, but also like, there's other, let's say, external factors that implicate their dispositions at times. And they cannot go back, because at one point, there will be no like sort of middle ground thing. Like, well, I'm not totally against the vaccine, but I'm skeptical. There'll be no middle ground there. I mean, you think about the number of times that the word drones has come out of Jimmy Dore's mouth, drone attacks. And I can assure you that the number of times that word has been uttered over the past 2 years is, somewhere hovering around nil in the context of what Joe Biden has done, because Joe Biden has very quietly, not completely, but very, very dramatically cut down on the clandestine and the semi-clandestine use of drone attacks in places like Pakistan, in Afghanistan, to the extent that we were involved in it in Yemen or Somalia. They're just been and tightened both as a decision-making process and in terms of like a systemic, process in the government, tighten the rules on engagement in that way and just cut down on the numbers dramatically. Now, what's happening in Ukraine, people can argue like this is a proxy war, and I think that's an arguable, I think that's, to some extent at this point it is on some level a proxy war, but it also is in defense of a country that has been invaded. I mean, it's just like there is no territorial ambition by Ukraine beyond disputed areas that were once Ukraine when it gained its independence. And so, it's sort of fascinating that way. But I guess my point is that at one point, Jimmy's going to find that his clicks, he can't go to the anti-vax stuff. He can't go to this, that his audience, maybe there'll be another candidate like Hillary Clinton who, while I was no fan, it's undeniable that there was a 30-year cottage industry in developing, hatred towards her. Maybe that can be aroused in the same level, in 2024 if there's a rerun of that. But, he's to do a thing saying that the Democrats are lying about Republicans having an ambition for a federal abortion ban is borderline bizarre. Yeah. And that's not, he's not talking to leftists there. He's not talking, there's nobody who is rational in their thinking that is in any way inclined to see the end of Roe being anything other than a tragedy and a travesty that is going to buy into that narrative. He is talking to, at the very least, sort of like libertarians and then to the right. So that's basically it. So.
Yes, definitely. Well, thanks, guys. I will definitely send you guys an email and appreciate what you do. And talk soon. Thanks again.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
That was interesting.
Yes. I am curious.
I am also curious.